Hey everyone. So what I'm going to do right now might be familiar to some of you, unfamiliar to some of you. I'm going to actually give you feedback through a slide presentation. The reason for this is it's sort of meta because you all, your group is going to be doing your presentations after break, but it's just to again familiarize yourself with the presentation format, but also because this was a group endeavor, and I think there's something very conversational and group dash E about this kind of feedback. So, your investigative report was focused on DARE. And you'll remember that a significant portion of your grade was based on the question itself. And so here I have what I think is pointing to the question that you're investigating. You write 3 major problems that plagued DARE during its prime years were increased drug use among students, an overall ineffective agenda, and loss of funding over time. So when we were talking during our conference, we were talking about how, yes, DARE happened in the 90s, but the reason why we're talking about it today is because it's still being presented as a plausible project, right? And so what happened is you presented DARE, but you didn't really present why we need to know about DARE and the fact that it was ineffective. And so you'll remember part of an investigative report is that it should really be relevant and urgent. And so the information you give in the conclusion about the Keeping It Real program really should have been brought up, I think, possibly in the introduction, and then you give us the information about DARE. And then the question really becomes, why are programs like DARE and Keeping It Real funded if they don't work? Or do programs like DARE and Keeping It Real work? And if they don't work, why are they still funded? Something along those lines. But that was really something that I felt was missing. You do such great work in organizing the sources and talking about the sources together when you present the stats of teens and drug use, but I felt like there was a sense of urgency that was missing. And so then you have your lead. Many children who went through the drug abuse resistance education program eventually ended up experimenting with drugs in their teen years. This is a really strong lead if that's all you were doing in the entire paper. I don't really feel like you were talking about DARE being ineffective because it led to increase in drug use. I feel like you were really saying DARE was ineffective for a whole bunch of reasons. The fact that it was ineffective leadership, the fact that it was funded and just like there was no purpose for it to be funded, so it was just a waste of money. So there were other things you were talking about that I think this lead might be misleading. So that's something that I want you to consider. So then the next part of your grade is based on how you summarize the 3 sources and how you're connecting it to your overall question. And I found this to be a strength of your report, specifically when you're doing the synthesis of Kirsten and Pierre. What I found really excellent is Kirsten, I believe, was from 1997, and then the Pierre research is from 2013. So the fact that you were able to show stats that that show that there's an increase in experimentation of drugs, and then Pierre talking about how, oh, well, you know, the kids were sort of turned off by all of this emphasis on drug sampling and police officers just going on and on about nonsense. I thought that was a really, really effective maneuver. And I also just want you to know that that's a strength that will carry you through literature reviews, because what literature reviews are really interested in is you connecting different sources and proving one specific point through the use of a variety of sources. So that was great. And then the next part is how you're creating new information. So 5 points of about how, not about, for how well you have created new data. This again was a strength. What you did was a lot of "this shows" sentences. Um, and I think that was partly because in class we talked about how presenting new data you can say "this shows." I just want you to be careful though when you do things like "this shows," then you're expecting the reader to see exactly what you say you're showing. And sometimes there's a disconnect. So when you say statistics and evaluations showed that DARE did not reach its targeted goals, part of me felt like it wasn't really new data as much as you just summarizing um, the stats. I feel like there could have been a more analytical and effective way of taking the fact that people are experimenting more with drugs, taking the research that shows that kids are turned off by um, the 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 police coming in and talking too much about uh, things that are irrelevant. Like there could have been a way for you to make a discovery about that, specifically that a program that's meant to get people to hate drugs or feel fearful of drugs instead are being bred to become indifferent or maybe even curious about drugs. That was the discovery really that you pointed to me during the conference, and that was something that I think could have been clearer in your paragraph. And so this is a specific paragraph in your paper that I feel can be improved for the same reasons that I'm talking about in terms of discovery. But I think what plagued this paragraph um, is the use of generalizations, and I'm not quite sure what the point of this paragraph is. Um, in a very like, because I know you since we talked to each other, I understand you were trying to talk about leadership. But if you read this, you say, while DARE wasn't reaching its targeted goals, they continued to function as usual. Fine. You're saying, they still were able to go on doing things even though they weren't reaching any goals. This pointed to serious problems within its leadership, organization, and ties with government. Okay, now just notice these are two introductory types statements, which is fine, but you always want to be suspicious when you have body paragraphs that have two sentences to get to the larger idea. Um, Leaders of DARE refuse to look at statistics or information pointing to its failures. All right, so that's something specific. The US DOE prohibits schools from spending its funding on DARE because the program is completely ineffective in reducing alcohol and drug use. So now I'm confused because part of me thinks you want to talk about how the leadership is ineffective, but then the other part of me feels like you're talking about how the DOE realized that DARE was ineffective and so they stopped having DARE in their program. So that was a little unclear to me because I thought that it was DARE was ineffective, but it was also that the DOE was ineffective for letting it go on for so long. Um, and then you write, the program was noble in cause, but not so much in its execution. I would have liked some examples in terms of what you mean when you say execution. Even with its many flaws, it still prevailed because it's hard to criticize something or someone who is seemingly just trying to help. Now, be careful. This sentence is essentially the same sentence that came before. When you say trying to help, you're saying the program was noble, right? Um, and so the two sentences then become redundant. Many experts assert that politics is what has kept the much criticized program around for so many years, despite a mountain of evidence that it's not only ineffective, but sometimes even counterproductive and causing harm to young people. So I don't want to harp on this too much, but what's plaguing this paragraph is just a slew of overgeneralizations. That means you have like 8 opportunities here to create 8 different body paragraphs. When you talk about the politics, I was curious. I wanted to know more about what you discovered about the politics of DARE. When you talked about the DOE prohibiting schools from using DARE, I was curious to know more about if they're prohibiting DARE, what's the feeling towards keeping it real? Um, so that's something that you just want to take a look at for future revisions if you choose to take this further. Then we had the bit about the satirical article. Um, this was really strong because what you're doing is you're showing me how DARE is ineffective. And so you you might have even wanted to just put at the in the beginning like the discovery sentence that DARE was like I think the discovery I made from here is DARE didn't even use um, credible information when advertising their program, but also perhaps in figuring out um, how to talk about drugs. So they're getting their information from these very satirical websites, and that's a huge discovery. And I think what is different about this paragraph versus this paragraph is this paragraph you give me very specifics. You gave me a specific example, and then you talk about it in detail. So that's just something to take a look at. Okay, so then there were 3 points for cohesiveness, specifically how one paragraph leads into the other. Again, overall, the cohesiveness was very strong. I just think, and this goes along with the first part that I mentioned, um, that your conclusion really could have started your whole report. Finding out about keeping it real now or at the end of the paper might seem like a drop the mic moment where it's like, oh wow, I learned all of this about DARE and now I'm seeing that it's still going on. But in an investigative report, you want to really tell us that in the beginning and then maybe leave us with a jarring statistic of how much money is being put into keeping it real, so that now we're left with, oh wow, like this is really relevant, and oh wow, this is how much money is being spent on this new program. um, we talked, so I just wanted you to note that I know that we talked, and I know that you all, uh, this group especially, you did a really great job with collaborating with each other. As far as I know, everything was seamless, so that was great. And then just, I'm doing this for everyone, 3 bits about grammar slash structure. In this sentence, you say, although the DARE program intended to prevent drug use amongst children, statistics showed the opposite took place. So this is a tense thing. Yes, this is happening in the past. The DARE program intended in the past to prevent use amongst children, but the statistics is something that is showing forever, right? Like the numbers are from the past, but they're still showing something in the past, the present, and the future. It's one of those things that's like it's just a given fact. And so for that reason, it should be statistics show present. And then here you have in result of this. You just want to be careful. That's an awkward phrasing. It should really be as a result, or in yeah, I don't really think in result works in any context. It should just be as a result. Um, and then you say the officer's examining of sample drug cases provoked students to lose interest. That was just an awkward verb choice because you're talking about students being indifferent and you're using a verb that is like the opposite of indifferent. So I might have chosen, the officers examining of sample drug cases caused students to lose interest. So just word choice is really important. DARE funding was an expensive program. I wasn't sure what you mean or what you meant. I think you're trying to say funding for DARE was expensive. Because here what you're saying is DARE funding is a program, and that's not the case. DARE is a program, and funding DARE is expensive, but all of this, it doesn't make sense. So you just want to clarify that. Overall, just to recap, the strengths of this report were your use of sources and the ability for you to connect different sources together in a paragraph. So that's absolutely a strength that you want to pat yourself on the back on because it's crucial for literature reviews. And then the areas, again, that were in need of improvement, overall organization. And when I say that, I really mean just making it clear why DARE is such an important program for us to talk about, and creating that sense of urgency. And then that paragraph that I was talking about, where you were talking about leadership, making sure that you're being specific, one, and that you're also clear on what is the discovery that you're making and what is actually supporting that discovery. Because in that paragraph, it seemed like there were a lot of discoveries, but some of it was muddled in generalizations, and then also some of it was unsupported, so it didn't seem like I should believe it. All right, so hopefully this is helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I know you're presenting on when we return. So if you have any concerns or questions about that, you can let me know as well. There's no pressure on you to revise any of these things for your presentation. Although if you wanted to, you absolutely could. And again, thank you for being flexible enough to present when we return from break. Have a wonderful break, and I will see you next week.